word that most people are remembering from that is conflict. So something is going to be talked about that. And I would like to basically go to the next slide to give you control. Yep, okay, no problem. And so what we're going to do in this particular hour are summarized as follows, following my personal introduction. We can discuss what business mediation is. We can discuss a little bit about what you observe when you see people in a conflict. Also, why is it important to see what conflicts are all about? Cultural differences. The company group has a very international presence. And that's very nice. It also brings a lot of cultural differences between people from various countries. And it's also interesting to look at how the users themselves respond to disagreement and conflict. I'm not sure if you have ever talked about that or thought about it, but it's maybe good to see what actually can be said about that. And close to the end, I would like to give you some freebies and takeaways that you can actually think for yourself what you can do to basically support your negotiations, or even when you are in early stage conflicts, where you feel a bit of tension here and there, to see what could you do in order to check that. In the end, there is opportunity for discussion and for questions. If you have any questions during the presentations, please do raise your hand or type it in the chat box, and I do my best to answer your question immediately or otherwise towards the end of this presentation. Does it work? Are there any questions? Anything else? No? Okay. Very good. So, personal introduction. My name is Herman Zandt. I'm from the Netherlands originally. I moved to Malta in the Mediterranean in 2001. I am a management consultant. I specialize in business mediation. I will explain in a minute what it actually is all about. And if I go, there we go. I have my master's, my MBA from the UK, in which I specialized also in the year 2004, very much on conflict resolution, keeping good atmosphere in the company, and especially that in an international context with many cultures and differences. I have two accreditations as mediator, one in London and one from the United States, and I act for the Ministry for Justice here in Malta as nominated mediator for local and for international disputes. I represent also the Mediation Training Institute, which is an American organization with worldwide presence, for which I act as master trainer and also as representative for 3 countries in the Mediterranean, being Malta, Greece, and Cyprus. As part of my research on this, I write articles. I keep myself informed about the latest. And one of the platforms I publish is on mediate.com, which is a worldwide website specifically about mediation, where you can find lots of interesting articles. And last but surely not least, I'm the founder of brevis.eu, a website on mediation, which is an online platform. I come back to that a little bit later on. And yes, I do have a private life. I mean, there's a lot already on this slide, but that's something that I do for my work and my business. Before we start talking about business mediation, I would like to get us all on the same page and the same frequency. And it's still meant as a positive start. At the same time, I would like you in your head, you don't need to mention it loudly, to recall a major disagreement you may have had in your business context, or maybe a tough negotiation or destructive conflict that you may have experienced yourself in which you were part of that. Do not mention any names, don't give me any emails with all kinds of outlines like, you know, I was right and they were wrong, whatever. Just think about what this was actually all about and try to picture the other person in your mind in that particular situation. How was that person behaving? And try to remember how it made you feel. I'll try to remember how this particular conflict or disagreement made you feel. Maybe you can recall your own emotions, that you can see how, or remember if you were angry, if you were frustrated, or something, that particular situation. Maybe you even recall your own behavior. Okay, this is just to get the mindset right, because everything that follows in the remaining part of this hour is actually much better understood and related to if you keep that in the back of your mind. Now, no one needs tissues here, so it is actually a good thing to remember this, how it actually happens. Because we're going to talk about the positive aspects that come out of conflict situations. So, what is business mediation? Let's start off with a definition of mediation. It is here described in a definition. And basically what is the most important part is when we talk about mediation is that we talk about a process where parties who are in a dispute or people who are in a conflict are assisted by a neutral third person. And this neutral third person is guiding the parties, helping the people to reach an agreement. And that means that the parties remain in control of the actual subject and of the actual outcome of it. So as a mediator, you do not take any decisions. I do not take decisions when I mediate people, but I help them to explore more, to guide them through the process. So it is a neutral role. When agreement has been reached, I step back and I remain available if needed. That is what mediation is. It is a way to settle disputes. It's a way to resolve conflicts. It is actually something that is on the map also in Europe since 2008 by means of a mediation directive. The European Union has actually recognized this as an efficient tool for reaching compromise or reaching an agreement. So it is something that concerns societies, it concerns civil matters, it concerns company matters. It's there where people are. And it appears as part of court. Many people know it, especially the legal professionals who are actually here today. As in a court context, you can also see this as an add-on, but you also see it in the public domain. See it informally applied. If you have an issue, somebody can call in, and then it will be, it will help to reach the settlement. When you read about it, if you Google it or you look it up on the web or in other documentation, you find a lot of buzzwords, you find a lot of repeating words such as mediation is good for you, it's cost effective, it saves you time, protects your relationships, rebuilds trust, everything. It's not a magic tool, but it does a lot of good if it's applied in a proper way. Business mediation is part where mediation is applied, is relating to anything in a business context that has to do with disagreements, sometimes tough negotiations, or outright conflicts, sometimes legal cases, where people are acting in a commercial context. That means that they're acting in a business context, are dealing with suppliers, nasty customers, are dealing with management, staff, everywhere where people are, that is where it is applied. So business mediation relates to disputes in a commercial or in a business context. So I'm going to ask actually here, but if you want to comment through the chat box, of course, also fine. When you observe people in a conflict, what generally do you see? Do you have any immediate thoughts when you see people in conflict? People become defensive. Anything else? Sorry? They listen less to each other, yes, that is correct. So the communication changes. Any other thoughts, any other ideas? When you look really closely to a person who is actually in dispute, right? Body language, yes, that's very, very important. When people are in conflict, they start sometimes to tremble and they start to shout a bit, and their movements become much bigger, and they start to sweat and do all kinds of things with a pen, and they get a bit nervous. So conflicts actually are something that happens. It is unavoidable. It's very normal actually to be in conflict, but the way how you handle it determines then the outcome. So it really affects us. And have you ever asked yourself, when you observe a bit, let's try to be a bit observant, do you have an idea of what people in a conflict are seeing? Do they see the same? Do they think the same thing? When they talk about a subject that they disagree, do you think that they see exactly the same thing? If they see the same thing, they would not have the conflict. That's correct. So they do not have the same views. Is that wrong? No, not at all wrong. It's just a difference. So some people can be difficult, but we rather say they are different. It's a bit of a slight change. And to illustrate this, how easy it actually is to fall into that kind of trap, and also how important it is to see that people have different views, especially in different cultures, which I come to in a minute, is that I'm going to show you one picture over here And I would like to ask you, just here, like, what do you see first time?
A woman or man and a child.
A woman, an old woman, old man?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so exactly, the longer you look, the more things you start to discover. Okay, at first sight we see an old couple, woman on the left, an old man on the right. But when we look really well, then we see that both of the noses of the people are actually the elbows of two different figures. The left one being someone having the hands in the air, and the right person playing a guitar. And what you thought was actually the ear of the right gentleman is actually the lady coming out of the door. So if Emma would say, okay, I see an old couple, and I say, well, I don't know what you talk about because I see a man playing a guitar, you might think that we're basically the crazy, but we talk about the same. We look at the same thing, but we see different things. So who is right? The person who sees the couple, or the person who sees the man with the guitar and the woman? Who's right? Both are right. Both are right. In a conflict, the same principle happens. To illustrate this, for the fun of it, I have another one. Look at this picture. Correct. At first sight, so, yeah, you see a tree, you see a lake, you see some stones, you see a romantic couple at the side, bottom right. But when you look a little bit differently, you see that there's the shape of a baby with the head on the left and the feet up on the right. We all see it? We all see the baby? Yes? Okay. This is actually a little bit easy when you look at it from a distance. But picture this one like right in front of you. You don't see it. So when you take this distance, you start to see different things. Now, why did we do this? Why did we look into this? It is because people can have the same views, the same picture, but different views. See different things, hear different things, we're all different. And that is why the subject of business mediation or conflict resolution is actually very much applying to all of us. All of us. No matter which country you are, no matter where you are, no matter which company, it is all about people. Does this make sense so far? Yes? Okay. So when we talk about the fact that people have different meanings and different views, then of course in a business context, we're all working together, this has an impact, this has a consequence. Generally, what I also see in my practice time and again when I am asked to come in, step into the room where two people conflict or disagree in a severe manner, is that emotions take over. Emotions as in angriness, frustrations, and all these things. And the behavior of the people is very much instinctive, it's very much emotional, opposed to rational. Hardly anyone that says, oh, that's interesting, I have a conflict here, and let's see what I can do. I have a conflict and I need to do all kinds of things. That is basically what is the general thought. It can also be a negotiation. If you want to get a deal done, and somehow does not like the terms, emotions take over. Business conflicts in the business context have a generally negative impact on three levels. The three levels are the individual, that's you as a person, but also on your team and on your own as on the whole on the organization. This was actually researched by KPMG, the audit and advisory firm, to see what actually the impact is on business. So lots of academic stuff we have come up with, all makes perfect sense. What is very important for us to know is that it goes across the whole organization when something really gets high, when it becomes actually a business problem. Therefore, we define a business conflict as a business problem which requires a business solution. So things really get high, or when a negotiation cannot be done, it may become a business problem. Right? So conflicts have a very wide impact. I make a little sidestep here to cultural differences. And I would like to ask you actually, in how many countries today is Creditinfo present as subsidiaries, more or less? 14. 14 or 14? 14. 14. 14. Okay. That means that it's a very nice bunch of people together, so to say, in many wonderful countries and so on. And of course, there are cultural differences. Culture, let's take a simple definition. Culture is the way how we do things, the way how we do things around here. That's our culture. So we have culture at home, we have culture at business, corporate culture. You have your core values, which should also highlight what's important in this culture, right? We have individual cultures, etc. Difference is also in the language, the communication. Different first languages. I guess that across the board you speak English. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So that means that for those who are not native English, you have to make a little translation in your mind. And the more you practice that, the more you get it. I actually noticed about myself a few months, years ago, maybe 2 years ago, that being Dutch, being from the Netherlands, I actually started counting in English. And counting is something you learn as a child, and that's, you know, so I think I have become more English speaking. Anyway, different first languages. And I want to give you just a little thing about cultural differences that have been researched at length by a gentleman. His name is Professor Geert Hofstede. Have you heard of Geert Hofstede? Okay. Very academic, very practical at the same time. I will save you all the details of this. But what I would like you to understand is that different cultures have been researched a lot. And this particular gentleman, well in his 80s right now, actually has done this for the last 40 years of his life, at least. And what he has done is he has basically taken countries or organizations or cultures, and he tried to research that in 6 different levels. He calls it dimensions. 6 different levels. And you see them listed on the screen. And the purpose of all this is that it says what if I can compare cultures one with each other. For those of you who are traveling a lot, if you're in sales or you're dealing with other companies or other countries, I'm sure you're aware that the cultural differences can be a little pitfall. You can go to another country, best of intentions, and somehow they do things different, and you realize when you're back home, you said, oh, that's why it did not go so well, or that's why, you know, there's possibly 60% that goes out of it. So this is one of the tools. What Professor Hofstede has done is for the purpose of creating an awareness of the cultural differences, potential pitfalls when you deal with people from different cultures, and therefore to increase the success of dealing with people. When you understand each other much more, you become much more tolerant, much more forgiving in some cases, and it's more difficult to make mistakes. And I can give you a little story to decide. That is that I went, it's 2.5 years ago now, I went to Asia. I was asked by a European-based head office to prepare the actual setting up of a subsidiary of a company in Asia. And that also included the training of a person, an Asian person, who will then take over the office once it's established and will become a regional manager. I think this person was from whether South Korea or Japan or one of those things. Now, I did not prepare that much because I said, okay, it's quite clear. And when we had established our contact and we went through preparations, I asked him a few questions. I said, well, so this is basically the project, this is what we're after, and these are the milestones that we have. Do you agree with these? He said, yes. I said, well, great. So we have a few office locations that we could consider. Out of the 3, I think option 2 is fine. What do you think? He said, yes. I said, great, option 2. And as a starting and launch date, let's take the 1st of October. What do you think? He said, yes. I said, well, this is going to be easy. Something might be happening here. And I asked him, well, are you aware that you're answering yes to all my questions? I said, what's happening? Do you understand what I'm talking about? He said, well, are you aware that you're not letting me finish my sentence? I said, no. He said, I mentioned yes to indicate that I understood the question. But then you continued, and then follows my answer. So talking about option 2 of the offices, yes, I understood that you agree with the second. But my answer is no, I prefer option 2. That is a difference in the way how the communication can go, that people out of respect tell me, yes, I understand your question, and my answer to this is no, I think we should do something different. Okay, it's just a little example how cultural differences can give you a totally different impression. This is not a cobweb without a spider. This is just a little picture that I've included in here. I will save you all the details, but this is one of the ways how different cultures can be compared. This is how we can compare different countries. I took actually 10 countries out of 14 that Creditinfo is present in, taking that you also employ, that you're working basically and based in this actual, well, that you're basically based in that office where this situation, that you come from that region. And there are many conclusions that you can draw. What you cannot see in this is that dealing with individuals. Okay, we're not thinking here on the individual level. We look at the environment that we will come from in that particular thing. And to just give you a few points only, is that across the board, when you look at the whole group, because of course them all next to each other, you can see that within the whole group, the general familiarity is that communications can be very informal. It's not a very formal communication that's expected within the environments. Right? There's a group thinking, there's family thinking, according to the research that is, right? On one hand, there is competition, there's caring, preference for rules. Interestingly, I found applying this set of knowledge is that the uncertainty avoidance, which is one of the things that came out of this research, is actually moderately high. So, being in the risk and credit rating business, the fact that one wants to deal with uncertainty is actually well less preferred. Much more to say about all this. What I would like to basically take away from this is that it is a measure of measuring cultures. Obviously, it's not the only one, but this is the most practical one. Do you have any questions about this so far? Yes. Power distance, that is the first one. Power distance is actually a dimension that has to do with how much people are people about the environment, how much people see hierarchy as acceptable or not. So the distance to power, are people formal and a bit of distance, or is it informal and a flat structure? For example, North European countries generally have a more flat structure, and people are more equal, whereas other parts can be more rigid, more formal. That comes out of what power distance is. If you look this up on the web, or you go to gearsoftsolutions.eu, there is a perfect description of all these things. It might be of use for when you're dealing with different values. Big disclaimer, once again, this says nothing about the individual. You cannot say a person from that particular country is like that, but it gives you an idea of what the general feeling is about these 6 subjects. Let's highlight a little bit of the impact on conflicts on the organization. In an organization, we're generally interested in competitive advantage, right? So we want to do best, we have assets, we have people, we have machinery, we have software, and we want to make use of this to the best of our knowledge for the biggest return. And a measure of the success of the company, when we measure the success of the company after 1 year, so to say. Do you have any idea? You can measure it in many ways, that's correct. But as a business owner, the income, yes, or even more so, the profitability. The extent to which we are able to make a profit. This also counts for your department. Your department might have a budget, and you manage your department in such a way that you use the resources, that you use the budgets, that you use them wisely, so that it creates a positive return. And I'm highlighting this because, remember, we're talking about business conflicts, we're talking about things that might go less smooth in an organization, is that we're looking at profitability by, on one hand, maximizing our income, on the other hand, minimizing our costs. You can see for your private situation as well, when you are maximizing your income and you minimize your costs, you have most money to spend. The same for a company. When we look at lowering the costs, so achieving the lowest cost in a company, because we want to be successful as a company, that's measured as profit, that means that we can look at conflicts in a cost context. Okay? So start not getting too complicated, I'll give you an example. It is possible, when there is a conflict in a company, really something goes a bit haywire, to calculate what the value is of this conflict in euros, or in any currency that you like, but let's take euros from the European point of view. And you have many calculators that you can find on the web. This is only something that developed in the recent years. When I did my research in 2004, there was hardly anything known, so I made my own thing. Out of these 5 listed, you can see that KPMG is one of them listed. Out of these 5, we would like to use the bottom one of the Mediation Training Institute, which I'm also involved in. And the Mediation Training Institute actually has done research, a lot of research about what actually does it cost when a company faces a conflict. Conflict between staff, for example, or conflict with management, or a conflict with a customer, or a conflict with tax department, or whatever it is, with whatever person you're facing. And it was actually the result of this was that an organization is generally not aware how much it costs. Have you ever linked that for yourself? Yes, productivity. Exactly. So you're saying that you're more productive when you are not at home. Yes, that is very correct. It's also backed by research, but I think it's also Zandt. And if you go back to my initial, very first question, think of a conflict you have experienced, you might see that you might have not been that productive at that moment, which is very normal. That's very much how things are. So let's look at an example of how do we measure that. Just quickly to give you an idea what the role is of conflicts in companies and why it is so important to look at. And the research has actually resulted in many things. One of them is the breakdown of so-called cost factors. So when there is something happening, and you can, like in a taxi, there's a taximeter running in the background, you can start putting euro figures, amounts, costs to what you're facing. You see them there. I highlight only a few wasted time. If conflict is not managed properly, you're wasting your time. You could have done better things in that. That is called the opportunity cost of certain other client or something else. Your decisions might not be very clear. So that is affected. You might lose key employees. You have to hire them. You have to train the new ones, and so on. Many more things, lost work time, health costs, people might get ill. There's a lot. And I give you a quick example to put this into perspective. Let's say in an organization X, there are 2 managers facing a conflict, a severe conflict that creates a business problem. And these 2 managers involve their team leader. And the team leader asks the HR manager to get also involved, to see if there is a solution. Right? And the average salary, all 4, on average, is, let's say, 40,000 euros per year. That's what the company thinks. This conflict goes on 2 months, 2 consecutive months. And each manager takes just one decision that's impacted by this conflict. So, for example, a purchase decision, something else. And after these 2 months, one manager is resigning, is leaving the company for whatever reason. His own decision might be forced, who knows. Okay? But let's take it this. If you calculate this according to the research, that means that you can put a financial figure to this. It's missing actually a last digit. The 3rd one at the top. Right? The bottom line, what we're seeing is that a conflict can really spiral out of control in financial terms. Applying the basic steady parameters, we would go more, almost reaching 200,000, primarily driven by the reduced decision quality. You see the 3rd one. The 3rd one on top should read 120,000 euros. Let's be critical and say this thing is way off. It's just half. We're still talking about nearly 100,000 euros in 2 months. Also, all focusing on sales. Right? So this is just an example. In real life, data is much more specific. Data is also used from the actual companies. Right? So that is basically making use of the research. Conflicts are costly. They cost a lot of money. And nobody sees it. They're hidden. Because we're all too busy in dealing with the problem. Maybe the financial people can say, hey, just a minute, I see something happening here. or productivity is down, so maybe we can measure that. But the costs are not very clear. So, to discuss a couple of things, I give you a quick recap because then we go to the next section. And what we're seeing, what we're talking about is the mediation, the business mediation part, in a flexible process. Third party neutral assists. Mediator is the neutral person. Right? Business conflicts affect the organization on many levels. The individual, which is you, the team, and the organization. Cultural differences are a potential source of misunderstanding and conflict. Might be misunderstanding, might be unintentional. And the cost of conflict is something that really spiral out of control, where it is the least effective. That's why business mediation has such a high value, because it has to do with the efficiency of it. This is the only thing that we need to keep in mind here. Does this make sense? Do you have any questions? Or online, do you have any questions? No? I know there was a question coming in. Or? It's okay? We can continue? Okay, fantastic. So, let's continue. And let's look at what we actually mean by conflict. I use a definition here that we use within the Training Institute context, which you see in front of you is a condition between people. It's two people. Right? But it's also a condition. Condition sounds a bit like a disease, isn't it? Okay? At least a condition is something that can be cured. That's the good news. It's not forever. It can be cured. And it is between people who are task interdependent, who work together. One or both feels angry. There's fault finding with the other. So that's finding fault. And it's all and actually the behaviors cause a business problem. A business problem in financial terms, a business problem in staff turnover, people leaving the company, or the atmosphere is not right, or I don't like these people anymore, or something like that. That is a conflict. And it differs actually from other things like undecisiveness. If you're not, if you cannot make a decision or a decision is not taken, that means that the situation can be a bit frustrating. So it creates edginess, so to say. That's not a conflict. It's just decisions to be taken. Right? If we would look in a museum and we look at a painting, and I say, well, it's a great painting, and you say, well, I don't like it, it does not mean that we have a conflict. We just have a disagreement. And that's perfect. People in stress, you make more with yourself, people around you. People in stress start to behave differently, they get snappy. They have no time for you anymore, they make quick decisions. Everything goes a bit like that. That does not mean that there's a conflict. That just means that there is stress. Right? So a conflict, even from a mediator point of view, is that we need to know if we have a conflict here or not, because it determines our actions. Right? Conflicts is one of my favorite pictures, by the way. Conflicts, what we see, is the tip of the iceberg. This is an iceberg. And this is an iceberg. Normally, you only see the top part, right, sticking out of the bottom. That's normally what you see when there is tough negotiation, people don't want to agree with you, or when there is a conflict. That is that you only see the tip of the iceberg. In other words, there's much more to discover. So you need to dive into it, literally, to really find out more what it's all about. I wish I could have shown this picture to the captain of the Titanic, right? Because there was a lot of stuff that they could have avoided. And conflicts are just the tip of the iceberg. I see in my practice as a mediator that conflict, the reason why people are tough with each other, is normally not what it seems like. It's not about unpaid invoice. There's much more to it. Being, for example, debt collection, a part you see it a lot. It does not have to be only like I don't want to pay. People might have a cash flow problem, or they did not like the service. So many reasons. There's much more to it. And let's look a little bit at how you, individually, you yourself, would respond to conflict. Now, I'm not going to test each and every one of you, but I would like to give you a few hints, few triggers, basically, on how you can see that for yourself, what actually happens in these particular situations, or maybe situations from. What do you think are the instinctive responses to conflict? How are we programmed? Any ideas? Raising your voice is one. Yeah. Any ideas? Everybody in the world? Instinctive responses to conflict. It's defense mechanism, yes. Defense mechanism. I mentioned it briefly before, and I'm sure that most of us have heard of fight or flight. Fight or flight. It's really that easy as it is. It goes from thousands and thousands of years back. You either fight or you flight. Exactly. I see here. Yeah, all fight. Very good. Very good. I could give you a stamp or something to reward you. Anyways, we talk about fight or flight. Fight, which we call in our practice also power play. Okay? Fighting does not have to be a physical fight. It's not like punching each other in the face, but it can be indeed shouting, right? Or it can be many different experiences. Flight or walk away, okay, is literally walking away from it. But for example, somebody says something over an email, sends you an email about it, and you say, you know what, just saw this for yourself, just pressing delete with it. You know, that is also in today's form flight. Flight. That's flight, walking away from it. Right? And there's a third one, which is ignore or avoid. Okay. Let's hold conflict in the situation will resolve itself. Fight or flight, or we call it power play, or walk away, and ignore them. The next question to you is: do you think that when you are in a tough situation or in a negotiation, do you think that this is the right answer to the situation? Does it resolve anything? Does it? No? I hear something no around me, so that is correct. It is a little bit like when you take a Panadol, you take a painkiller. Right? You have a headache, you take a painkiller. Great. After half an hour, you feel much better. But when the pill has stopped working, then you still headache is back. So it's temporary relief to walk away. But if you want it to not, in most cases, it will come back. So these are not the right responses. And remember that we said about business conflicts, there's an interdependence, there's anger, there is a business problem, and we need to do something about what? That's what we're addressing in business mediation as a conflict resolution method. A few words on why conflicts escalate. Have you ever experienced that conflict somehow keeps dragging on and gets worse and worse, it's bigger and bigger, and you don't know why? That has also been researched. And it has to do with our behaviors. I'll save you all the psychological parts of this, but it means that there is something that triggers it. We perceive in our minds in a split second a threat. Oh, it's not good, I might lose my job, or trust is lost, or something like that. It gives you an emotion, gives you feelings like anger, and that builds up to our primitive responses, primitive as in the meaning of being very old. That we do the power play or the walk away, the fight or flight. And that behavior then causes a trigger, is actually a trigger to the other person who says, oh, just a minute, I feel threatened here, I have an anger in this, and I'm going to fight or flight back. That is why this cycle starts failing. Okay? This is a very simplistic way, but it's a very true way of doing this. That is why conflicts escalate. Simple as that. And that is in the office, that's on the street, and believe it or not, it's even between nations. Conflict resolution between countries. Avoiding war or solving war or something. It's all people. So this principle applies to everything. The question is, how can we stop this cycle? How can we stop the conflict from escalating? Because it's cooperation. I'm sure that many of you know the leadership grid. What is your leadership style? Wonderful tests you can do on all this. Leadership style depends also how you respond to this. The leadership grid that you see here is actually determining, are you more focused on tasks or more focused on people? So when there's a conflict happening in my business, I can say, well, that's actually tough luck because the tasks don't get done. That's a typical answer for a more task-oriented person. A similar question would also be answered like, oh, that's tough because people might suffer. That's one of the people like answer. Right? So you can see it in different ways. It depends on your leadership style, when you're managing teams or when you're managing the company, to see like how do I respond to conflicts. Can be measured in wonderful ways. Another way to see how you respond to that is how do you balance assertiveness, standing up for yourself, standing up for your beliefs, what you think is right, compared to cooperativeness. Would you like to cooperate or not? You have people who are saying, I'm so convinced that I don't want to listen to anyone else, this is the way, and otherwise nothing. Now, the top right, if you can read it, it says collaborating. It's the same as cooperating. And if I remember well, that's one of the core values. Okay. So when collaborating means that you are very assertive. You don't let people run over you or forget about what you actually think. No, you say, no, this is what I think, I put my point forward. And at the same time you cooperate and you listen to other people. That is a way to respond to conflict as well. So it has to do with cooperation and assertiveness. Much more to say about all this. Also has to do with the communication styles. How clearly do you communicate? Communication is actually sending messages. Sending messages. What I'm doing to you now is I send words. And it's also, the other side is receiving messages. At this moment, I do not know exactly how you receive all this. I understood the technology is working, so you must receive something, right? But the fact is, how clearly do you communicate? What are your intentions in it? How well are you actually, how well skilled are you? Do you have an idea? I can ask each of you. Do you have an idea when in our lives, individually, we are actually building up the foundation under our conflict resolution skills? When do we learn how to deal with nasty situations or difficult people? When we're 5 years old. Any other thoughts? Through experience. When do you think the foundation is built up? At school? Which school? University or younger than university? Yes. Senior family. Actually, the foundation of the way how we're dealing with other people, especially in conflicting or negotiating situations, the foundation is found in the first 5 years of our life. The way how we get what we want through parents or people who take care of us. Schoolyard, right? Someone's going on sweets, what am I going to do? You know, these type of things. So in the very early stage. So each of us, all of us, each and every one of us has already skills to solve conflicts. The question, however, is when you're in your job, are these skills sufficient for handling today's and future conflicts? That's actually what we're looking at on self-handling. If you want to manage your own conflicts, it's okay to have conflicts, by the way. It just depends on how you handle them. Conflict resolution skills are therefore a life skill, because conflicts happen in your company. They happen outside of the company. They can happen in the parking space. Somebody just fix your parking spot just before you, and I'm going to tell this person how bad he actually is. I just mentioned something. And it's also a leadership competence. It is personal leadership, but it's also a good trait for team leadership, company leadership. Leadership meaning taking control over the situation. It's very good for enhancing personal relationships. People who are handling conflicts are actually much easier to talk to, handling them in the proper way, I should say, because you know that if you say something wrong, there are no consequences. This person will not explode in all kinds of ways. It enhances the personal relationships. It increases trust. Let's do a quick recap before I come to the closing part. We saw that the conflict is a condition between people. There's interdependence, that means that people are actually really working together. You can see it very much in family companies, for example. The father runs the family for decades. Sons and daughters are involved. And they cannot just walk away from this. There is also the family. There's interdependence in more than one level. There's anger involved. It's your fault. It's your fault, and it causes a business problem. That is very, very important. It causes a business problem. That's when, in business terms, in business mediation terms, we talk about conflict. The rest is possibly not so nice, because we do not call it a conflict that we invest our energy into to solve it. We talked about the instinctive reactions, fight and flight, or ignore and avoid. And we said that these are not solutions to these reactions. Conflicts are never solved. Never solved. Might give temporary relief, like painkiller, never a solution. And for yourself, if you're interested in this, you can find ways how to see how to respond to conflicts. As we mentioned, the leadership style, we mentioned the existing skills you may already have. Right? And that is actually something that is very important to realize. There is a whole world out there to discover, which is interesting. Are there any questions at this moment, either from the online audience? No questions? Okay. So I come to the last end, and that is that when we talk about mediation or a way to resolve conflicts, what we actually want to do is we're looking for a solution or a way to go forward on several levels. The procedure, the emotion, and the substantive issues. That in simple language, that is, we'll look at how can we sort this, what is the process of the problem, does it give me some kind of emotional satisfaction, apology, or something else, right? And what exactly are we agreeing? It's on the substantive level. It's like, okay, we're going to do it differently, we're going to change the team, or we're going to something else. That's the outcome. And you can relate it to negotiation, which is more, let's say, the general way, the voluntary way, where you and the other person directly in a private context are finding some form of outcome, some form of settlement, that does not have to be fueled by anger, but it's still, a person-to-person dialogue. Litigation, that is a different word, we're going to court and suing someone. It's non-voluntary, the judge will take a decision, it's very formal, and it's very public. Everybody can read about it, in most countries at least. And of course there's mediation, which is more voluntary, and there is much more of a control of the process and the outcome by people who are involved in this. It also stated interest-based. What exactly do you want? What is it that you're looking for? Most likely, in most cases, having a face-to-face dialogue under the actual guidance of a mediator will give you satisfaction on all the two levels. Right? If you would go to court, the procedure is fixed, you have to stick to that. Right? Most likely, because there are also situations where it is different. Most likely it's worth trying. This is, I'm not sure if you can really read it very clearly, but it's actually a model that came out of my own research since 2004. That is like, okay, if I would like to see if I can find a solution myself to this, and not let someone else judge or decide for me, but it's my conflict after all, so I want to see if I can do the outcome. That means that face-to-face dialogue under guidance will have the biggest chance of success when you're interested in solving it in the shortest time, for the lowest cost, financial cost, but also other costs, like relationships failing or something like that. Long-term effect, so long-term effectiveness, when you want to maintain the trust levels, when you want to increase your reputation, take care of leadership. Okay, I wasn't in this situation, but I managed to get out of it. Reputation on a company base as well. The company does not want to get drawn into negative publicity, so the marketing has to run faster then. High confidentiality, low risk. If it fails, well, then there are no consequences in the mediation. It's confidential after all. And you have what is here listed as consensual intentions. That means that you really want to continue in the best of spirits. There is no need to walk away from it. Say, okay, let's make it work somehow. If that is your interest, then the concept of mediation, that is talking face-to-face with the other person or persons under guidance of a mutual mediator, will have the biggest chance of success. A quick note on what we do within the Mediation Training Institute is where it is based on practical side that we're giving tools and techniques to individuals in a business. So basically, every position on every level, but also for business leaders, directors, executives, so on, to give the skills for handling early conflicts or the so-called clashes, and also to prevent conflicts. What can you do? Remember that you have to tie this to the cost of conflict. If it's unmanaged, it can cause a lot of costs for the company. Right? So we have two seminars that the self as mediator. It's between yourself and someone else. How can you handle that? And also the manager as mediator, managerial parts in a company, where you actually help two other people or more other people in a dispute and you get them together. Right? There's also additional programs to become a fully accredited mediator. Self-mediator is a short program, it's 8 hours, it's 2 times 4 hours to be precise. Right? It's based on successful conflict conversations, constructive conversations, and the manager as mediator is where you can actually handle the process with others. Is that a clear difference? Right? Between yourself and someone else? You're one of the parties, you're wearing 2 hats, the party and the actual mediator, and the manager is more like, if something happens in my team or in the company or whatever, that we can manage it ourselves. Complex disputes are disputes which are actually getting out of hand. Okay? Make a little comparison with the medical. The previous programs I showed are more like first aid. Something happens, somebody cuts his finger or something, you know how to put the plaster, you know how to do the bandage. Right? It does not make you a surgeon, it doesn't make you a medical expert, but at least you can do something immediately there and then with a minor things. For the complex disputes, you see here Creditinfo, that is the website where complex disputes, where the surgeon comes in, hospital, if you like, okay, where you say, wow, these disputes have really gone out. There is violence in here, or there is dismissal, or threatening court cases, or something like that. And yes, you can find that in your company. That is where these things can come for further handling. Out of court, that is, to see what can be done. I founded this in 2010 as an online platform for immediate support, even from the luxury of your own desk in conference. I use Skype a lot for video conferences. Right? It's the second best. The best is always face-to-face discussion, but through Skype it is very easy. Right? You don't need to drive kilometers on end, sit in a waiting room or whatever. There's also a self-scheduling tool on the website. So if something happens or even discuss it in conference, it is a tool that is successful. And in case you're interested, on Creditinfo there are also the business mediation guidelines, which is giving you as a 12-page document, which gives you a lot of information about this whole subject, much more than I could squeeze into this 1 hour. One of the things there you find is a process that's for complex disputes accounting. It's a structured approach to handling conflict. I will save you all the details, but it's a structured way of handling this type of situations. To close off, I promised you a few tips, a few things, a few triggers for yourself to see what you can do to facilitate your engagement. And if you have situations that are a little bit uncomfortable, say it might not be a conflict, or maybe you have something in your work, outside of work, right? That is where you can do something here. You can check something. You can review your communication style, the way how you communicate. Right? Communication can be done on many levels. It can be done verbally, by phone, chat boxes, if you use any other things, email, obviously. Some people still send faxes. Okay? Many ways of communicating. And one of the things that I see a lot in escalating conflicts is just misunderstanding. Conflicts are allowed to escalate because there is a misunderstanding of what it actually means. So check if your message has been received, not like did you receive my email, right? But have you really checked the message, what I want to say? Have you understood? And then listen. Listen even more. Let the other person, rephrase what you said in his or her own words. That helps a lot to get a better understanding of what you're actually saying. And something that I've noticed is that even nowadays there is so much communication going through chat boxes and emails and everything, that sometimes we're just waiting a day because I didn't get a reply on my email. And I really need to think of the indecisiveness. I need to make a decision now. Let me send another email to do this. Just pick up the phone. It takes you 1 minute, 2 minutes. Did you get it? What do you think? Are you okay? Fine. Can I go ahead? Yes, great. Confirm it in an email if it's needed. There's an phone call. Thank you for agreeing. And move on. It helps to speed up. It's a very simple thing to do. Hardly done. Hardly done. Misunderstandings create conflicts. Miscommunications create conflicts. If you're up to it, think a bit about your own behavior in certain situations. Try to be a bit self-critical. Did you react to a walkaway or a power play? Right? How was it actually reacted? How did you react? Are you still showing respect to the other? And if I'm well, respect is also one of your core values. That's respect. Not a coincidence. And that means that you can look at how you handle it yourself. Was it fruitful or not? Or how did the other person handle it? Was that because I did something and that was a reaction? So by analyzing the situation a bit, you can discover many things. It's good to be a bit self-critical sometimes. And the good thing is you don't need to tell anyone. It's all in your mind. And the last one, when you approach the other, so when you approach the other person, in a business context, we're always discussing business goals. We never discuss the person. We never say, well, that report that you wrote again has mistakes, how could you do it? Right? The person might possibly walk away about it. You can also say, I'm concerned about the quality of our report. I noticed that certain gaps in this report might exist. We need some of the picture. How about we find a solution and look into it together? Sounds much different, doesn't it? The purpose is to get cooperation, especially in a business context, to get cooperation. And I mentioned at the last one to follow the 4-step process. I did not go into that, but it's one of the self as mediator seminar, where you can structure an approach with difficult people, you can structure your way and finding the time, finding the context. That means like have a nice room, close the door, have a nice coffee or a nice drink, and give some time to focus. Switching off your phones. Let's look into this now. Put on the boxing gloves. Right. Okay. All right. To talk it through, to talk it out is much more to say that, but it's all reviewed in that program as well, and to make a long one. That is something that is quite simple to do actually. Everybody can learn it. And it helps things to get more smooth. Does this make sense? Yes? Are they simple to apply? Not simple to apply? No? Not easy to apply. With a bit of practice. Difference of culture, yes, definitely. In any case, it is a list of around 8 points, so you might, or 7 points. So even if you pick one of them and try to be critical about it, it's perfectly fine if you want. So I'm concluding here. I see that the hour is almost done. The title of this was actually that business mediation is a powerful tool. It's a tool, right? It's like when you use a hammer. It's great to put nails in a wall, but it's useless when you want to get a screw out of the wall. So use it in the right context. Mediation, right, is a powerful tool. You keep control over a situation. It's a leadership tool. Self-mediation, managing conflict. And you take responsibility over the outcome. You don't say to someone else like, "Oh, you sort it out." No. You, as yourself, you take responsibility for the outcome. From an organizational point of view, because we talk about business mediation, that means that you can gain competitive advantage. Think of all the cost factors, the lost time and losing people and I don't know what. You can gain competitive advantage by strengthening the organization like this. And you would minimize the cost of money, as we saw before. All those 9 factors. And last, certainly not least, it is a strategic management of conflict. Strategy. It's the way to achieve your goal. Which strategy are we using? Unmanaged conflict is expensive and hidden cost. The conflict is a powerful motivator, therefore, for positive change. When you're in it, it doesn't look like it at all, right? But when you can take control over that situation, you can achieve so much more in your team, or in your organization, in your department, whatever it is. And generally, These are basic tools in which you can manage it, and you can turn it into something constructive. Does it make sense? Yeah? There's much more to say about it. Time is nearly up, I see. So I want to ask you if you have any questions in the remaining time, anything that you, and especially you online, if you have any thoughts or any questions, you can ask it now, or you can drop me an email. My email address follows later. Any questions? Yes. That's correct. Yes. Yes. The question here, I will repeat it for you, is that I mentioned in the beginning that I'm nominated mediator for the Ministry of Justice in Malta, and that's from part of the Mediation Center here in Malta, and also in many other countries in the world. There is a Mediation Center which Malta falls under the Ministry for Justice, which means that there is a list of mediators, people who can act as a neutral person, and to be called in certain cases to guide the process between people in a dispute, people in a litigation. That means that if you need certain criteria, as experience, which accreditation you have, and so on, that means that you can get involved in situations. Now, one of them could, for example, be a shareholder dispute. So where people who own a company have different shares, they own different parts, are running into a dispute, they start accusing each other, and they say, I'm going to sue you, well, I'm going to sue you even more. Okay, so we end up at the court, and the judge looks at both sides and says, well, I think that there is a chance of success when they are actually going to talk directly to each other. But these two parties have already talked to each other, and most likely for the last 5 months they have not talked to each other. So it becomes a bit tricky. So putting them together on their own or with their lawyers might still remain position. So that is where there's an example where you as a mediator can be asked to call in to take control over the process, only the process, and then to have the subject be handled by the people and manage their own process. There are costs involved, indeed. The costs are determined in many cases by the mediation center, but there is also a little clause that allows me as an independent mediator, because I'm independent, I'm not on that table, to set my own fees. And these fees you find at the last page of the business mediation guidelines. You mean how long? How long? Okay. Well, the question is, how long does it take to complete the mediation? And in general, in time-wise. Now, I can tell you that in a workplace, in an informal mediation by, or let's say within a company, most cases are sorted within 1 hour and a half. 1 hour and a half, just 1 hour and a half. Why? Because the communication is structured. When you go to the complex disputes, and it's more when you have really difficult things like people are accused of things, there's violence, and so on. In those cases where mediation is suitable, it's not always suitable to be together. I think, for example, victim offender, or really violence in that. That's not really so suitable for mediation. But generally, you can talk about weeks rather than months. It should not take that long. It should not take. I know of a couple of cases where people mediate for years. The mediation is not applied how it should be. So it is a very fast, provided it meets the criteria, it is a very fast way to get into an agreement for the simple reason that people are facing each other, they're face to face, talking under guidance. So yes, sorry? That's correct. Yes. That's correct. That's indeed correct because of the involvement of a neutral person who takes control over the process, which means that's when we're going to start, sets up the room, comfortable chairs, no clicking pens though, because that might distract, no glasses in some cases because people might become aggressive, so better have plastic cups. It goes into really detail. And then to make sure that there is actually in one day, for example, that you say at the end of the day, that's where we stop. So now you have the stage to manage your own conflict. And that has been done through exploration. There's bargaining involved, right? Back and forth. So that is how long it takes. It is weeks. My shortest mediation in a complex dispute case, which was between two business owners about a business partnership, is actually described very briefly in the mediation guidelines of the case studies, was over 3 weeks. It was 4 hours per week, which is 12 hours. And the thing at stake was to whether stop the company and fire 12 people or go into a partnership. And the good thing is that the company, the people agreed. 12 people were actually hired or continue to be employed. And nowadays, they're still operational, and they have 20 people. That was within 12 hours. Anyway, there's much more to say about it, obviously, but I hope I've given you some form of idea of what the world behind business mediation is. There was another question you said you would like to ask at the end.
What happens if it's not successful?
Yes, what happens is the question if a mediation is not successful. But that is when the parties do not agree on it, right? So was it a waste of time? Many people say, well, it was unsuccessful, what a waste of time. The reality, however, is that as part of the mediation, the parties are talking face to face. Again, most cases they have not collaborated for a month, but people have not talked to each other. So in their minds, they got these monstrous ideas of what the other person is. And after half an hour, you very often hear, oh, this person's not bad. Doesn't talk to the issue. In reality, it means that they have done their own, they created their own picture of this, which is no longer the reality. They have not talked directly to each other. So if mediation is not leading to a full agreement, a full settlement, the benefits are still that the parties have actually talked, they have re-established their communications. They have, in many cases, agreed to disagree, so it has become clear what this actually was all about again. Maybe you remember conflict is really important to some, but some stages say, actually, how did this start? Right? What was this all about? So it becomes clear what the points, the bullet points are, or what the differences are. Yes. Yeah, that could be a benefit. That's a third party. That's correct. However, if basically what was mentioned here is that another benefit would be that the third party is actually saying what he thinks of this, so there is feedback from a neutral source. That's very tricky. As a mediator, it's very tricky. Because if I, as a mediator, would say person A, person B, well, let me tell you exactly what I think of this. Person A is right, person B, you're wrong, and why are you wasting your time? It is so simple. That would not make me so. Yeah. 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 That is one of the things indeed. As a mediator, I'm not sure if everybody understood it, but in a nutshell, it's like it's good to get some feedback about that from a third party source. It's not the role of the mediator. As a mediator, you're not saying there are different forms of mediation that I did not go into. One of them is called evaluated mediation. That's when, for example, two architects are into an issue. Okay, let's get a third party architect in who's going to say what he thinks of this. Right? That's more of the subject level. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That is, as a mediator, it's tricky to say what to find of this because the purpose is to guide the communication. And the last thing, which is a very common benefit, is that there's always an agreement on something. There's always an agreement on something. So out of, for example, 8 differences, we agree on 3. And it's fine, we still disagree. So let's focus on those 5. Right? And in a court context, in a litigation context, then the judge will then see that, okay, at least 3 they agreed on, so I make my final judgment on those. And that judgment can be, let's say, influenced by, it can be the outcome, yes, not exactly what was said. There would be a report. As a mediator, I draw a final report. Everything is confidential, so it doesn't have to. But the parties can very often say, you know what, I would like to continue with this. I would like to get a judgment ruling on this. That can be done in a best spirit. It doesn't have to be, you know, let's get the judge's opinion on this. Where then the final report would be consensus has been reached about point 1, 2, 3. The remaining points of disagreement are that. And that's already a step forward, isn't it? So there are always benefits to this, provided that it's handled well. Everybody can call him or herself a mediator. It's not a protective term. But look for accreditations, the experiences, and the connections that are there. Because damage can be done, like in the medical field. You cannot call yourself a doctor, but if you act like a doctor, you might cause severe damage. The same in mediation. Are there any other questions or anything from online?
Does anybody have any final questions for Herman? I will take your silence as a negative. I'd just like to thank Herman very much for today. We're very honoured to have you here. I know you're a very busy gentleman. Thank you for taking time out to be with Creditinfo, the Creditinfo Academy today. Just for everybody, it will be uploaded to the meeting space, and we will also upload the webinar to YouTube and onto another internet source, the Chronicle. And thank you for your time today, everybody.
Thank you very much to everyone. Pleasure being.